Our next presenter is Janis Winchester, and Janis is a retired forensic science and presents a lot in terms of the shroud and everything that she's learned. So, Janis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for a great welcome. I'm so delighted to be here with you. I have enjoyed learning about the shroud, and that's what I hope to have you get excited about. You might see a way to be challenged and be able to work with the shroud scientifically, historically, with archaeology information and biblical writing. So all of that is part of how I came about to accept the challenge to learn more about the shroud. I've known about it all my life, but I didn't dig into it except for the last 15 years. Research, which has been with the BTA image analyzer and digital imaging. You investigate, you decide. And I just wanted to see how long 14 feet, 14.5 by 3.5 is. And we have some wonderful volunteers here. So you see which I saw, watch John and here saw it. And looking at his fabric, you can see how on this slab about limestone, the shroud was put down, fabric put down. Then they put Jesus on top, and then they put this over the head down to the feet. So what we're talking about is this image that's inside. She's going to look inside this fabric. And that some of the blood does go through, but not the image itself. The cloth found was what we call today the cerium of Oviedo, and that was 22 inches. So you'll see it's much smaller as it was placed, and Jesus on the cloth and his head down. So they couldn't wrap it all the way out of my stay usually. I had the opportunity to meet Kevin Moran. He's since passed away, but he helped me learn the BPA image analyzer. So I ended up being able to work on 4 different instruments and 4 different oscilloscopes. And all of them showed the same thing, plus the digital image showed the same as the original analog VPA. So what this shows is the image information, that image of the man of the shroud is then shown in 3D as a portrait image rather than being distorted as other
at the evidence of the Shroud of Turin. As an overview about this presentation, a little will be said about the scientific research team of 1978 STURP, the carbon-14 testing of 1988, and the life of the historical Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the passion, crucifixion, death, and resurrection, and what was found in the tomb. And about my research, initially I read the books and articles of the field and met with shroud researchers. I'm a fellow in the American Academy of Forensic Sciences and a life member in other forensic organizations. And I received a postgraduate certificate in shroud studies from the Rome University. Also, about this overview is the gift of the love of Jesus Christ, possibly imprinted in the Shroud of Turin, given for all people, and is there significance today for the Shroud of Turin? This is a photo that I took in 2015 in Turin, Italy, of the original shroud. And in 1898, the first photograph was taken by Secondo Pia, and this was discounted because folks did not believe what they saw. And then in 1931, the professional photographer Giuseppe Henre took a photo during the exhibition, and people were fascinated. The scientific study of the shroud began in 1978 with the STURP project, and that was 40 highly trained scientists who dealt with sensitive radioactive materials who volunteered to travel to Turin on their own money to look at the burial shroud up close. They were intrigued as to how the image appears on the cloth, and the first scientific instrument used on the shroud was the VP8 image analyzer and the oscilloscope. And what caused this interest in this VP8 image analyzer? Well, they could see that a photograph, a two-dimensional photograph, was then shown as a three-dimensional portrait. Here's a photo of the imaging in a live video of the photograph as it shows, as it goes through the VP8 and shows on the oscilloscope monitor. Up close, you can see the portrait image is proportional, so it's not distorted. And after the STURP team spent a week in Turin, they accomplished a lot of scientific experiments, yet they could not say how the image was put on the linen. The results of the STURP testing were important because they were able to say that the image is not painted, and the color resides only on the topmost fibers, and the entire image was formed by the same mechanism. No image was formed under the blood stains, and the blood on the cloth is still largely red. Old blood is normally black. With the carbon-14 testing, the labs of Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona were given a small sample, and from that they determined it was a medieval forgery. However, the prior historical, archaeological, and scientific results were ignored. And the upper corner is where the samples were cut from the shroud, from the original shroud. The carbon-14 testing was a big blow to scientific research in that the British Museum refused to publish the results of the testing of the three laboratories. And then in 2000, two people saw that there were additional threads found on the cloth sample that were not linen. And then in 2017, a law student submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the British Museum, and they finally complied, and some of the data was published. The carbon-14 testing gave everyone the presumed overwhelming acceptance of the date and thus the presumption of forgery. The results of the data from the three laboratories showed several failures, however, with the outcome that the edge used to test did not represent the entirety of the cloth. Thus, results are not valid for the dating of the shroud. And here is a close-up view of the different threads that were seen in the Oxford sample. And what are some of the characteristics of the evidence? And the color change of the flax linen is important because the color is concentrated in the crevices where two or more threads cross each other, but it is absent under the threads where they cross in the weave of the cloth. And the fibrils of the linen show a form of cellulose dehydration. That is, the blood was first on the cloth and then the image formed. This means the image must have occurred after the body was placed on the shroud, after the blood flowed onto the cloth. You can see the little tiny discoloration, and that is what forms the image of the tortured man. Here again, you can see the dehydrated acid oxidation of the linen at the molecular level. And we can see the image because the information that shows the appearance of a crucified man has been encoded into the pattern of discolored fibers on the cloth. If this burst of radiation from the body were sufficiently brief and sufficiently intense, it would thrust blood, wet or dry, off the body onto the cloth by a natural process called radiation pressure. The detailed studies of the front and back images of the scourged man show such a microscopic complexity that nobody has been able to reproduce an image identical in all its details. Now, about the blood is real blood, and the serum fluid which is around it may be seen using ultraviolet photography. No way anyone could have painted this. It is human blood, and in some areas soaks through the fabric. The blood is pre-death, while alive, and post-mortem, post-death. It contains bilirubin caused when a person experienced extreme shock, such as hematidrosis. An examination of the injuries seen on the man of the shroud, the blood, and other peculiarities, when researched by 4 shroud researchers, shows the results that, quote, all the evidence is in favor of the hypothesis that the Turin shroud man is Jesus of Nazareth, end quote. A commonly asked question is, what about the DNA testing? To date, this has not been possible due to the lack of standards and the extensive number of folks touching the shroud over the years. And what are the characteristics to look for? Well, there's direct and indirect statements by individuals using the avenues of science, history, archaeology, and biblical writings. There's also the results of the impressions using science, history, archaeology, and biblical writings. And use of technology, photography, imaging, and scientific instruments. The latest findings are those with the use of wide-angle X-ray scattering. This finding shows the possibility that the Shroud of Turin is as old as the time of Jesus Christ, about 2,000 years old. Well, if the Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, who is Jesus Christ and what is the reason he came to earth? In the beginning, God the Father created the heavens and the earth. The earth was waste and void. Darkness covered all. God created light. Let there be light, and there was light. And God is life, love, and light. Then God created Adam and Eve. They lived with God in paradise. Adam and Eve sinned against the one commandment of God. God promised to send a Redeemer to open the gates of paradise for each person who chooses to want eternal salvation. To fulfill this, God sent his only Son. Centuries later, an angel appeared to a virgin named Mary and said, you shall conceive in your womb and shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. And the Holy One to be born shall be called the Son of God. He is both fully human and fully divine. About 30 to 33 AD, Jesus began teaching and healing, and large crowds followed. As a foreshadowing of events to come, Jesus raised Lazarus, who had been buried in the tomb for 4 days. Jesus said, Lazarus, come out of the grave. And then Jesus said, unbind him, and Lazarus lived. There are numerous statements given to the apostles and the large crowds made by Jesus Christ, as found in the biblical writings. And Jesus said to them, thus it is written, and thus the Christ should suffer and should rise again from the dead on the 3rd day. Some of the religious leaders in Jerusalem became alarmed and wanted to do away with Jesus Christ, for they feared they would lose their power because of the number of people following him and seeking miracles. Jesus Christ was accused of treason because he said that God was his Father. The Last Supper on the Thursday before Jesus was arrested and crucified, Jesus said to the apostles, "Take and eat. This is my body, and take and drink. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is being shed for many for the forgiveness of sins." Today, the same body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ is offered in Holy Eucharist and Masses throughout the world. After the Last Supper, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jerusalem, and there Jesus wept. Jesus prayed intensely, saying, "Father, if thou art willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but thine be done." His cup, the reason Jesus Christ suffered, was for all the sins of all people, past, present, future, thus completing the promise God his Father made to Adam and Eve to open the gates of paradise. This caused great stress and agony, and Jesus Christ's sweat became as drops of blood running down upon the ground. In this same garden area, Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. Jesus could have fled, yet he was arrested by the Roman soldiers. He was scourged with a Roman flagrum, a type of whip, spit upon, hit, mocked as a king, pushed to the ground, put in jail, and made to carry his cross to Calvary, falling down on the stony ground 3 times. The flagrum whip was used by Roman soldiers. The maximum number of scourging lashes was 40, yet various medical examiners have counted over 120 lashes completed by several executioners. And here you can see that the flagrum with the leather straps and the balls, the metal attached to the end, you can put that as a coincidence over the back dorsal area of the shroud to even see the little balls that hit his back. The flesh was torn from the body also. And here's the helmet of thorns, and they took metal tongs to put it on Jesus' head and to smash it down. And you can see the bloody remains here of where the thorns went into his head and scalp and back of the neck. Yet the face of the Shroud of Turin is peaceful. People comment that while it's very, very sad with all the wounds, his face is peaceful. Here you can see a close-up of the forehead showing the puncture wounds from the crown of thorns. And the nails, about 7 inches long with a 1-inch head, were hammered into his wrist and feet, and Jesus struggled to breathe. This is a close-up view of the back of the hand showing the blood and the fingers. Jesus Christ hung on the cross, gasping for breath, and around 3 p.m. he expired. The face cloth, known today as the cerium of Oviedo, was placed over his bloody head according to Jewish law. A Roman centurion, in order to make certain Jesus was dead, thrust a lance through his ribs, and immediately there came out blood and water. The centurion said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." Then Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus in order to bury Christ in a new tomb. The original serpent evil, described in Genesis 3:1, leaves people with the venom of hate, bitterness, and a hardened heart. Jesus says that he removes this hatred when we look upon him, when we keep our eyes fixed upon him, and the Son of Man must be raised so that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. They placed Jesus Christ on a new shroud. A large stone was rolled over the entrance to the tomb. Now, this is what we showed earlier with the cloth, 14.5 by 3.5, placed on the limestone, and then Jesus was placed down, and then the fabric went from around the back of the head down to the toes. The tomb was dark and cold and quiet. A blast of force exploded in a brilliant light. This is thought to be powerful radiation emanating from inside the length of the whole body, only touching random molecules of the fibers inside the folded cloth where the man of the shroud once lay. A blast of force? Was this the result of eternal divine power of the God who created light and heaven and earth? What remained behind were a linen shroud and ties with a unique portrait and the bloody-faced cloth called the cerium. The disciple Mary Magdalene, returning on the first day of the week to finish the burial process, sees the empty tomb, and she tells the apostles, and John and Peter ran to the tomb, and John, when he saw the linen cloths, he believed. And after the resurrection, Jesus appeared to the apostles and others. The apostle Thomas doubted the happening. He stated that he would need to place his fingers into the wounds of Jesus, and Jesus complied. How do we know this crucifixion, burial, and resurrection happened? Here are 10 ways. You may find even more. This is a photo of the Dead Sea located in the areas of Israel and Jordan. This is the area where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And this is a picture I took in the Dead Sea area where you can see the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls that provide biblical writings from the Old Testament and the New Testament, such as Deuteronomy, Genesis, and Psalms, were located. And the scriptures offer the direct testimony of individuals, one of the first source of history. And the evidence found in the biblical writing, as found in the Bible, has something for everyone to examine. The shroud may be viewed as a document of the passion, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, as found in the biblical writings. And historians such as Eusebius also wrote about the events of the life of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Another point is there are archaeological findings such as where Jesus Christ lived and taught. Also, the historical writings, such as the illuminated manuscripts of Hungary, depict the characteristics as found on the shroud and the unique burial cloth showing the herringbone fabric. The early Christians were willing to sacrifice their lives for the way to follow Jesus Christ. They lived at the same time as Jesus, and they saw what happened. And they then told their families and friends and brethren, and it spread for about 300 years that the way was the way Jesus lived, the way of love. The art was also influenced by the shroud, using the likeness of the shroud face. And then this is a photo of icon of Christ's Pantocrator. It says, "I am the light of the world. He that follow me shall not walk in darkness." And I took this at St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. And just a last idea, the scientific evidence is available for everyone who wants to evaluate the findings. An extensive review is found on the website shroud.com, and we may recall the words of Jesus Christ, quote, "The truth will set you free," end quote. Now, about the history of the shroud. After the resurrection, the shroud was kept hidden due to the danger of destruction of the cloth and danger to individuals. There was King Abgar, although, who heard of the healings and wrote to Jesus asking him to come to Edessa. Jesus replied that he would send a messenger. In the year 944, the shroud appeared in Constantinople, and in 1204, Constantinople was sacked during the Fourth Crusade. The first known exposition was in Lire, France in 1355. The fact that the shroud was kept from the public for many years helped preserve identifying evidence. And there are many books and publications dealing with the travels of the shroud and sudarium. While both cloths were together in the tomb in Jerusalem, the journey of the shroud is different by way of Turin, Italy, and the sudarium to Oviedo, Spain. Yet today there is evidence that they were both used on the same man. There are unique water stains, burn marks, patches, and reweaving on the shroud. And this is an example of the pottery jars where the shroud may have been hidden, rolled up, and if water was on the bottom, it would have collected and made the water stains. So here's a picture of the water stains and the burn holes and the triangular patches that were added after the fire. Overall, how the image of the man of the shroud was embedded on the cloth as a result of the resurrection has not been found in a laboratory. My research, I used the analog VP8 image analyzer and the oscilloscope. I also researched the digital imaging technology, which showed the same apparent three-dimensional uniqueness. And I had the opportunity to use 4 different VP8 image analyzers and oscilloscope, with the results being the same for each one. Here's a photo from the Shroud of Turin showing the blood from the nail holes and the bones. And there is no other two-dimensional photo that shows a three-dimensional portrait. This is a photo using the VP8 image analyzer to show the detail of the bones of the fingers. And this is important because you can see the width of the lance is similar to the width that was seen on the spear wound, the lance wound on the between the ribs of Jesus. And this is the bloody lance wound again, showing the white elevated area. This white is bloody white. And you can see the X, Y, and Z axis. This is a view that you can see the dimensions of the X, Y, and Z. If you can see that the bloody wound, because it's white, shows the height coming out from the shroud. And this is a photo of the use of computer imaging of the area under the chin using the software Fiji, Photoshop, ImageJ, and 3D Max software. Dr. Petra Soons conducted research in the area beneath the chin for possible letter forms. This area indicates that the object with letters was placed on the body before the top portion of the burial cloth was pulled over the head into the feet of the man of the shroud. A possible object used is a gold band worn on the turban hat by the high priest. And here's a picture showing the perspective setting, and you can see the letter forms there. And this photo is used with permission by Barry Schwartz. and a special thank you and appreciation to Mr. Brian Zajac of 3D Architectural Solutions. And here's another close-up of the letter forms. The cerium of Oviedo, which is smaller in size, was found by the apostles also. It contains dirt and bloody stains. Here's a photo showing a test done by the Spanish Shroud group, and it demonstrates that the lance that entered the area between the fifth and sixth ribs has a trajectory through the pericardium and the heart and in the direction of the dorsal shoulder area on the shroud. And here we look at this again to see that the cerium has coincidence with the upper dorsal area of the shroud. And it's a great research discovery as it helps date the Shroud of Turin, indicating the coincidence that the two cloths were at one time used on the same person. The interesting fact is that it was in a special chest in Oviedo, Spain, and no one knew the significance until around 1965 when the blood stains were compared with the shroud. As a summary, does the evidence speak for itself? What are the direct and indirect statements made by individuals? What is the physical evidence? What are the findings of technology, photography, imaging, and scientific instruments? And do all of these aid with the question of authenticity? Here's an example of a chart that may be useful. I took the events of Jesus' life and looked to see if science, history, archaeology, or biblical writings spoke to that. And here's another part of the chart. And at the end, you may wish to make your own chart showing unique characteristics about the shroud. Is there significance today for the Shroud of Turin? We can pray that God increase his mercy in us so that in difficult times we may with great confidence do his divine will, which is love itself. I have always wanted to work for peace, and the Shroud may help folks encourage peace, joy, and love for their family, friends, communities, and nations. We may glance at the intimate face of the Shroud and recall that God loves us and that everything is possible with God. In summary, Jesus Christ taught the love of God, the love of neighbor, the salvation for the kingdom of God. If you want to change something in your life, even if there is suffering, recall that looking at the face of Jesus Christ may be helpful for completing the goodness of the project. Here's an example of learning new ways so you may respond rather than react to situations. Let me demonstrate.
And here's a training example of which and I want people to lead with a skill. You could tell this is trade year. If you want to change anything in your life, you might be wanting to do a better skill or help or financial or whatever you want. You can use the training cue of next time. So you might want to learn how to balance a ball and it falls on the floor. And instead of beating yourself up, you say, next time. Next time I'll do it a little higher. Next time I'll do it a little wider so that you have this opportunity to change without stress. So if you are happy, sad, or mad, it's never too late to talk with God. And Jesus Christ showed that he loves all people. He said that as Anka loved you, you also love one another. Have no anxiety, and may the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your hearts and your mind in Jesus Christ. And it's been a joy to present this exciting information about the Shroud of Turin and the cerium of Oviedo. So thank you.
arms of his father. Yes. Oh, I saw it. When they laid Margaret in the arms of his mother, did he still have the cloth over his face so she could be?
No, that was just while on the cross.
The scriptures it says that he arranged his life. Edge ran say the confirmation of how she lays sins, for chastity.
Definitely. Very good point.
Alrighty. Any other questions? Janis, thank you.
Thank you all.